Okay, so now we're looking at the other possible price control, a minimum price or price floor. Notice, as I've already sketched it in here, the price floor or minimum price, in order to be binding or effective, has to be at a price above the existing equilibrium price of $45. The price floor, the intention here is to provide a price higher than what the market would ordinarily assume at $45. So any price less than that, the market's already going to naturally move to 45. So a minimum price at $30 is moot. It has no impact because the market would already be at a price higher than $30. Anyway, so the effects of a price floor or minimum price imposed through government intervention, again, not thinking or talking about when or why, but instead focusing on the impact on the consumer producer and therefore total surplus and market efficiency. At $45, the equilibrium quantity is 300 units are going to be exchanged between buyers and sellers, consumers and producers. At this new minimum price of 60, the quantity demanded, QD, is going to be smaller than the quantity supplied. In other words, sellers want to sell more units at 60 than they do at 45, but consumers or buyers want to buy fewer units at $60 than they did at 45. So we've created artificially a situation of surplus, and it only is able to continue by virtue that the government has imposed this limit. If we remove that price control, the market's going to naturally drop or be driven to $45, the original equilibrium price. Now, the original area of consumer surplus would have been from $45. All of this area that is above the equilibrium price but below the demand curve. And the area of producer surplus would have been all of that area that is below the equilibrium price but above the supply curve. So I've just kind of crudely outlined those two original areas. Given this price floor or minimum price, since the quantity demanded is smaller than quantity supplied, the quantity demanded is the limiting factor here. It doesn't matter that sellers want to sell what looks to be more than 400 units because consumers are only willing to buy 200. So at that quantity demanded for $60, we're going to draw, again, a vertical line down to the supply curve. Again, we recognize or call that a wedge. The wedge is being driven in between the supply and demand curves at this limiting quantity QD. All of the area from the equilibrium where supply and demand intersect over to the wedge, the area I'm shading in now, that is again dead weight loss. We're giving up the number of units traded at or exchanged at $45 would have been 300. Now, under this new higher price situation, it's only 200. So 100 fewer beneficial transactions occur. Therefore, any of the producer and consumer surpluses in connection with those exchanges are also forfeited. Now, the winners and losers in this, the area of producer surplus, remember, is above the supply curve up to the price that producers receive. So since that's now $60, producer surplus, again using PS as a reference for producer surplus, all of this area that I've just crossed in is part of the new producer surplus. The area of consumer surplus, again CS is the abbreviation, would be below the demand curve but above the price that seller or buyers are paying, which again is 60. I think you can see that total surplus, being the sum of consumer and producer surplus, is reduced. It's smaller by virtue of fewer transactions, 200 compared to 300. The area shaded in with deadweight loss has been given up. And so in essence we are accepting this level of market inefficiency, a loss of producer and consumer or total surplus, in order to accomplish some aim, some other goal the price floor was intended to accomplish. So there is a trade-off. We may have benefited some groups, but the cost of that is living with less efficiency, a smaller or reduced area of total surplus. Okay, all we got left is quantity control, which we'll look at in the form of a quota, coming up next.